So today is the last day of June 2024, and it's today we transition from the days of apple into the days of vine. And of all the 20 trees in the Ogham, vine is probably the most contentious for a couple of reasons, which I'll talk about in a minute. I'll just bring the PowerPoint presentation up. One of the main contentious things with vine is some books have said that the Celts didn't have vines, that it's not a native tree. And so some books suggest using a substitute. So some people substitute blackberry for the vine, because it's a fruity bramble. It's kind of a vine-like thing, I suppose. And there's nothing wrong in that. I think one of the best motives for using blackberry is it's everywhere. Certainly in the UK, in England, it's everywhere, whereas it's hard to get pieces of vine wood or a branch of vine. It usually means trespassing into someone's garden or a pub and pruning, you know. So blackberry bushes and brambles are everywhere, so it's easy to get. Yeah, there was another reason, I'll come to that. So this presentation then today is about the vine tree and the white goddess. I've not really done this before. The White Goddess is mainly a book written by Robert Graves, and we're going to delve into that for reasons that will make sense shortly. But this is our third year going around the Grove. For basic lore about the vine, you want to look at our YouTube channel for Vine 2022. And for herbal medicine, you want to look for Vine 2023. So this year, our modus is looking at what gods and goddesses might apply to each tree of the Ogham. So I have already created a video that's already on the YouTube channel called The Celtic Gods of the Vine. So the idea that the Celts didn't have vine is not true. There's plenty of evidence. There's even the Museum of Ireland on their own website shows archaeological evidence of Roman amphora, which were ceramic pots that were used to carry wine, you know. So even if the Iron Age Celts of Ireland didn't grow vines, they certainly traded for wine. They knew what it was. And then there's more evidence going through the centuries. There's even possibly evidence of Ireland having wine around 400 BC. There's some pottery with stains on it, and the stains are thought to be wine stains. But again, were they growing their own vineyards or were they trading for it? We don't know. But anyway, with this video of Celtic gods of the vine, I focused on gods. One of the best attested ones in Britain under the Roman Empire, throughout the Britain, Sylvanus pops up quite frequently. So that video is looking at the gods, whereas today I want to look into the moon goddess. So it's a different emphasis or different focus. But what's nice about Sylvanus specifically is he's often depicted carrying apples and grapes. And I just love that, because apple and grape are side by side in the Ogham, you know, so that's really nice. And he's a lovely deity. He is a green man, really. He's just a Roman example of a green man. He protects the forests, looks after the forests, and looks over the fruits and nuts of the trees. So he's the abundance of the forest, if you like. So yeah, I've got a lot of time for Sylvanus, but you could just see him as the Green Man or Pan or that kind of thing. So quickly where we are then. So the days of Vine in the year wheel go from the 9th degree of Cancer the Crab to the 27th degree of Cancer the Crab. So it's the only tree or shrub that is completely Cancer the Crab. And the important thing of that is, out of the entire zodiac, it is only Cancer the Crab that is governed by the moon. So it's a bit fun that the name for the Ogham is Moon, and it's the only one governed by the moon. It was a bit of fun, not reading anything more into it than that. But it's the first tree of the third Aicme, which will take us all the way to Elder at the autumn equinox. So just as the first Aicme begins with the birch tree and kind of Ellen of the Ways, and the second Aicme begins with hawthorn, the May Queen or Olwen, the third Aicme is beginning with, theoretically, the Moon Goddess, but by whatever name we're going to give her. There's a lot of contentiousness with this idea, and I'll talk us through it, and afterwards we can have a good chat about it all. So each Aicme also has a kind of star law mystery tradition. So the mystery for the second Aicme was all the rites of May and Beltane and all of that. And energy rising up to the summer solstice moment. Now the energy is descending down, and it will take us to Lunar, and then very interestingly to the Leo Virgo cusp, which was the starting point or entry point into the mystery traditions of the ancient world. And that's where we encounter the triple goddess of the Ogham. So the kind of mystery for the third Aicme is this descent into the mysteries. So this is a picture of the stars of the third Aicme. Predominantly, it's Hydra the Water-Serpent. And Hydra the Water-Serpent is the biggest constellation in the night sky. And the interesting thing with it is it spans the entire third Aicme. So in the top right-hand corner, you can see it says Cancer. So that's Vine, Moon, where we are right now. And so although the sign is named after the tiny, almost invisible constellation of the Crab, which is there on the ecliptic, but it's hard to see, the dominant star constellation of that Cancer section of sky is the head of Hydra the Water-Serpent, and its tail is in Libra. So that's how big this snake is, this water snake. And the important things with the mystery traditions is that on its back, there's the important constellation of Crater, the wine mixing cup, which is the big golden vessel that you can see here. And after, on the other side of the golden vessel, is Corvus the crow. So this is the main imagery for the third Aicme, this big water serpent, the heavenly grail, the wine mixing cup, and Corvus the crow. Where we are now, then, the days of Cancer the Crab and the head of Hydra is also a very important post-summer solstice perspective of the summer night sky. Almost directly above Hydra is Draco the dragon at the center of everything. And these were important dragons or serpents of mystery traditions. So Hydra the Water-Serpent is wrapped up in stories of Apollo, the sun god, and a cup and a crow. And it was the second labor of Hercules to defeat this big water serpent. And Draco the dragon is another labor of Hercules. It was laid on the dragon that protected the golden apples of the Hesperides, which was another labor of Hercules. So these are mystery school motifs, if you like, and the golden apples protected by the dragon also relate to the apples of Avalon, and even the Irish story of the three brothers who turned into three birds to get three golden apples for Lugh. It's here in the night sky, you know, so whether it's three birds or three apples, that's kind of the summer night sky where we're at. Various motifs for that. Above the dragon, Draco, are the three birds, which we've looked at before too. They're the summer triangle. They're the three birds of Rhiannon. Rhiannon as a sovereignty goddess or summer goddess. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at. You can see at the bottom the head of Hydra, and then Leo is above, and Crater and Corvus are near the tail of the Hydra, spanning the entire third Aicme. Now, something wonderful happens with the Ogham Grove, is that from the midpoint of Leo, Lunar, begins the 18 degrees of Broom. And so she is the maiden aspect of the triple goddess, corresponding with Crater, the heavenly cup, the cup of the mysteries. And then Blackthorn is the mother figure of the triple goddess. And then Libra is the elder as well. You know, so this is actually the star law illustrated of the big heavenly cup next to Leo, Corvus the crow. And you can see I've put in the tail of the blue serpent touching Libra. That's the tail of Hydra the Water-Serpent. So beginning now with the days of Vine, this is where we're going until the autumn equinox. And once we get to the days of Elder, then there's the descending into the mysteries, which is what I would call the wild hunt and everything with the fourth Aicme. So there's already a video on the YouTube channel called the Third Aicme Overview, and that explains the third Aicme in more detail. So getting back to Vine then itself and the significance of the moon. So there's this thing which is really important. It's kind of like a Rosetta Stone. But what you have, this is from Hadrian's Wall, 4th century, and it's a Mithraic rock birth. But if you look directly above the head of the main figure, you've got Cancer the crab and Leo the lion. So Vine is in Cancer, and it's a way of dividing the mind, and the cusp between Cancer the crab and Leo the lion, or the cusp between the moon and the sun. That center point is the third eye and descending down through the planetary chakras through the body. And it's a very important point, and it's in the days of Ivy. I'll talk about that in a minute. So the way I understand it at this moment in time, and the moon can represent many different things. It can represent nighttime and dreams and psychic abilities and the emotions and all of that kind of thing. But for the mind, it can also represent reflected sunlight, which is what it literally is, you know. So you've got the sun and the moon. Stevie Nicks, in a wonderful song called Landslide, describes it as a mirror in the sky. You know, the mirror in the sky is the moon reflecting the sun. So it's that reflective mind. It's the part of the mind that thinks, ponders, daydreams, imagines, muses about things, whereas the sun aspect of the mind is just radiant. It just knows. It doesn't have to think or contemplate. It just knows. That's just shining out, radiant brow, if you like, you know. So whatever you make of the moon, it is that important reflectiveness. And if you think about this first Aicme and the second Aicme as being energy rising up the spinal cord and going through the realm of Brigid in the first Aicme, and the goddess of poetry and the cauldron of inspiration and all of that, and that finds its way up then right to the radiant brow with the salmon's leap. The moon mind is contemplating all of that, all of the philosophies, all of the visions and dreams. That's all the moon mind. It's the reflective mind. And then the energy, so there was rising energy up to the pineal gland, and then with the moon and the sun and this cusp, there's an energy sinking back down, because we've had summer solstice. There's a kind of sinking down from the head down to the middle cauldron, which fits in with Crater the wine mixing cup and Leo broom. Leo governs the heart. So it's actually going from head stuff down into the heart centered focus, if you like. So these are traditions, mystery traditions. Now, this what's amazing with this, and I haven't really talked about it because it's not kind of relevant to the Ogham, but in France, their kind of Glastonbury tour or Sacred Hill is a hill called Vézelay, where there's a basilica, which was originally dedicated to St. John the Baptist. He's a summer king. And at summer solstice, the sun lights up the aisle at Vézelay. So there was all this kind of John the Baptist summer king stuff there. But it became more famous in the medieval days as the cult center for Mary Magdalene. They claimed to have her relics and her body and so on. It's been contested by other academics, but for centuries, Vézelay claimed to be where Mary Magdalene was buried. Now, at the entrance to Vézelay, there's a big carving of Jesus with Cancer the crab and Leo the lion above his head, just like this. Yeah, it's taken from the Mithraic mysteries and reused by medieval Christians decorating their abbey. But here's the amazing thing then. So the cusp between Cancer the crab and Leo the lion, more often than not, is the 22nd of July, which is the feast of Mary Magdalene. And that's a strange thing. That's like conscious awareness of mystery traditions that the medieval cathedral builders were thinking of, this moment of energy coming down into the middle cauldron, Star Lord stuff, you know. There's tons of evidence of Christianity adapting itself from older pagan mystery traditions. Anyway, that aside, then back to the moon. And if we look at this wheel of deities that we've been observing through the year, Vine corresponds with the Cancer, the moon. And in the classical world, that was Artemis to the Greeks and Diana to the Romans. So she was the moon goddess. Or really, the moon bit is quite secondary. Primarily, she's the goddess of the hunt, and that was more important. She's multifaceted, of course, but the hunting thing was the bigger thing. The moon is just one aspect of her, but she's usually depicted with the crescent moon on her forehead. So pondering that, what would be the kind of Celtic Artemis or Diana? Is there a Celtic moon goddess? Well, not wanting to upset anybody, hand on heart, as far as I'm aware, I can't think of one. You know, traditionally, before Artemis and Diana, the classical world had Lunar, is often depicted on friezes and sculptures. And for Greece, there was Selene, or Selene, however you want to pronounce her name, and she's an embodiment of the moon. But if you go online and you Google Celtic Moon Goddess, more often than not, you're going to get Arianrhod or Kedwin. There is no other obvious lunar goddess. The Celtic goddesses are primarily solar, which is interesting, and they're sovereignty goddesses dripping in gold. You know, the emphasis of the moon is not so apparent. But we'll now take a look at someone who dedicated his life, if you like, to figuring out the moon goddess from a Celtic world perspective. And that's this chap. So The White Goddess is the title of his book. The book has hundreds of pages. I think it's about 700 pages, roughly. I haven't got a copy near at hand. It's in Guernsey. But it's a kind of compilation of many essays that he wrote. And it's an incredible work. And it's had a massive influence on modern paganism. Robert Graves himself is a fascinating man with a pedigree of Irish poetic mysticism, if you like. His father, what was his name? Alfred. His father was Alfred Percival Graves, and he was a big Celtic revivalist, Gaelic revivalist and poet. But more importantly, is Robert Graves' grandfather was Charles Graves, and Charles Graves became Bishop of Limerick, but he was also the president of the Royal Irish Society. He was hugely involved in the first attempts at deciphering Ogham from the pillar stones that are scattered around Ireland. And he's also responsible for what are called the Brehon laws being translated from Old Irish into modern English. So Robert Graves' own family was steeped in Irish mythology, steeped in Ogham law, steeped in Celtic revivalism and so on. But Robert Graves himself was a bit more anglicized than his father and his grandfather. And he was primarily educated as a classicist, focusing on Greece and Rome. So his book then, he was pursuing what he called the White Goddess, and his belief, which has had a huge effect on modern paganism, is kind of simplified that he believed originally in the Bronze Age that the whole world was matriarchal and that there was a kind of unified goddess all over the known world, which back then was Europe and Mesopotamia and North Africa and so on. And he refers to her as the white goddess. And sometimes she's a moon goddess. Sometimes she's just his muse, everything that he sees in the divine feminine. And sometimes he sees her as three-formed, a goddess of birth, a goddess of life, and a goddess of death. And the kind of modern pagan idea of maiden, mother, crone comes from the white goddess. You know, when you see statues of triple goddesses in like Hecate or Diana trivia, Diana three forms, or even the Celtic triple goddesses, there's no suggestion that one's young, one's middle-aged, and one's old. That's not there. They all look like three women in their prime. But Robert Graves, thinking of birth, life, and death, he kind of had these three ages, and that was, yeah, it's really hard to pin it down and explain it clearer. There was a famous book that came out at the end of the 1800s called The Golden Bough by Fraser, and that's a really difficult book to read. But basically, it puts forwards this kind of Diana mythology of the sacred grove of Diana at Lake Nemi, and that there was a seasonal consort that protected the goddess. And anyway, it had a huge impact on thinkers of that time. And another writer in the 20s and 30s was a lady called Margaret Murray, and her books on the witchcraft cult of Western Europe also inspired Robert Graves, and she considered the witchcraft cult to be Dianic. So Robert Graves was kind of working with the Golden Bough, working with all his academic training of classical studies and classical mythologies, and also looking at fairly contemporary ideas about the witchcraft cult of Western Europe and weaving it all together and perceiving from his perspective this kind of idealized matriarchal culture that existed before patriarchy erased it all. Now, that's a bit black and white, it's a bit overly simple. The evidence isn't there that there was a unified matriarchal society before the Abrahamic patriarchy. You know, lots of cultures were matriarchal, but it's such a minefield to discuss that on the internet, you'll find academics destroying Robert Graves. Equally, you'll find academics praising him for his vision as well. So he really is, you love him or you hate him kind of thing. But I think that probably, I'll come on to it near the end, because he created the 13-tree Ogham system. I think the main difficulty with Robert Graves that causes so much triggering in people is that the way he wrote, he was absolute. He would say, there's this, this, and this, and that means that. And this is this, and that's that. So he was establishing facts which were really his own ponderings and his own ideas. Now, I love him to pieces, and you can actually go on YouTube and Google, look for him on YouTube. There are I found about 6 interviews. So there's videos of him being interviewed in the 1960s and the 1970s. And they're fascinating videos because they're like half an hour long. Frustratingly, he doesn't talk about the Ogham. He's talking about his life and other things. But, you know, he's a very canny man. He's a bit of a trickster. He's clearly eccentric, very, very, very clever and inspired, you know. And so the White Goddess is all of that. And it would have been better, I think, if he hadn't tried to establish facts, and if he just said, These are ideas. These are inspirational ideas. This is how I see things. And that would have been a bit more, it would have meant that academics wouldn't shoot him down so much. You know, if he was just sharing his inspiration as a poet, that would have been clearer. But he kind of sets himself up as an academic, proving things. Anyway, it's a hotbed. So the moon goddess then goes way, 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 way back, of course. On the left here is a lovely Inanna Ishtar type figurine with a crescent moon on her head from Mesopotamia. So she's going to be Bronze Age, roughly. And then right up until classical times, Diana, as a huntress, has the crescent moon on her head. So I'm not denying that there's a moon goddess, or that's not significant in any way. And triple goddesses, remember Graves was saying she's a moon goddess, she's a muse, but she's also the triple goddess of birth, life, and death. Now, when you get to triple goddesses, like I say, they're not all young mothers and elderly, they're just all the same. And when you get to figures of Hecate, only one of the three has a crescent moon. Another one has a sun, and another one has a symbol for the earth. So in a way, the three are representing moon, sun, and earth. You know, so the triple goddess isn't a moon goddess. One aspect of her is a moon goddess in that kind of classical Greek way. But of course, the Celts did have, although I can't think of an obvious moon goddess, they did have triple goddesses. But again, it's hard to pin them down as Maiden, Mother, Crone. They're just three figures together. One of the recurring ones are these three figures who are always cloaked and cowled. And then the archaeologists just call them the Geni Colati, which just means the hooded spirits, the three hooded spirits. But there's always three. And what's interesting with these figures is they usually accompany iconography of Sylvanus, the woodland god. So the kind of Romanized Brythonic Pan is often accompanied by these three female figures. A lot of modern pagans, then, if you Google Celtic Moon Goddess, the most common one that comes up is Arianrhod, simply because her name literally means silver wheel. And a lot of people see the silver wheel as the moon. It's kind of logical. However, it's not definitely what it means. Our old Welsh stuff claims the constellation Corona Borealis, the Northern Crown, as the silver wheel. I would argue that the entire night sky, the circle of the night sky and all its stars, was the silver wheel. But it's subjective. It's down to you and what you think. But a lot of people go along with the silver wheel of her name being the moon. And then another popular one is Kedwin, which I can't see any lunarness in Kedwin's story. I just can't. She's a mother goddess, obviously. She's a goddess of mystery traditions and rites of initiation. Arianrhod is a reluctant mother goddess. You know, she doesn't really want to acknowledge her child, the sun god Hly. But it's really hard to see any obvious lunar elements in her story. So just to wrap this up a little bit, I know I haven't really shed light on much, just kind of opening a can of worms, really, but we'll talk about it more. Here's Robert Graves' Ogham system from the White Goddess. And he tried to do some strange things, really, looking back on it, especially as his grandfather, Charles Graves, had been a major academic involved in deciphering the Ogham. Robert Graves himself doesn't seem to be too Irish in his perspective. So he takes the Ogham, and then he takes a Welsh poem called The Battle of the Trees, which is a poem about the god Gwydion animating a forest to fight a battle. And then Robert Graves tries to force this Welsh poem about the Battle of the Trees into the Ogham. That's one questionable thing, because it's not an Irish system, although there are similarities between Irish and Welsh law. But the biggest, strangest thing is that Robert Graves wanted a 13-month year wheel. And so he subjectively dropped 7 of the 20 trees to have 13. He wanted 1 tree per month for a 13-month year wheel. It sounds wonderful because, like, the word month means month anyway. It is like a moon cycle, moon division, if you like. But mathematically, it doesn't work because there's 2 types of lunation. There's a sidereal lunation and a synodic lunation. Neither of them is 28 days. So Robert Graves' mathematics was all about the moon period being 28 days and there being 13 of them. But the strangest thing too is that you would imagine that any observation of the year using the moon would start with a new moon or a full moon. That would be the logical thing, from full moon to full moon or new moon to new moon. But Robert Graves doesn't do that. His system begins always, every year, on the 24th of December. How often is the 24th of December going to be a new moon or a full moon? You know, it's a strange thing. But he was, again, in fairness to Robert Graves, he's exploring, he's creating, he's being inspired, he's figuring things out. But trouble is, people have taken it on board since 1948 as an authentic Druidic year wheel tree thing. Why the 24th of December? Well, he's actually used the sun to start the thing. So winter solstice and then 3-day standstill gives you the 24th of December. So he's using a winter solstice observation to then begin a moon count. It doesn't work. It sounds brilliant. It doesn't work. And the sad thing is, as we've observed elsewhere, the 7 trees that are missing, specifically apple and yew, it's a crying shame. So having said that, The White Goddess by Robert Graves is still a wonderful book to have on your bookcase. And I think you just have to see it as his magical system, his way of decoding mythology, you know, and that's what it is for him. It's just, yeah. But you'll read good and bad things about him on the internet. And I would definitely go on YouTube and watch some of the interviews, see him talking for himself. He's a lovely, fascinating man, you know. So just this then again, all of the goddesses of the Celtic world primarily are golden. They're solar, they're sovereignty goddesses. They're not really the moon, you know. That's just not what they are in the stories. So what do you make of that? It's just a different way, you know. The moon goddess is what to you and your magical system, it's whatever it is. I'm a Cancerian. In my younger years, I worshipped Selene a lot. She was a big part of my psyche in my 20s. But I can't find her in the Celtic mythologies. As an older man, it's the sovereignty goddess. Now, the interesting thing with that is the main sovereignty goddess for the centre of Ireland at Meath, the Hill of Tara, is Maeve. And starting today, with the vine, the vine is the letter M. You know, so after the summer solstice, the first tree of each Aicme spells Mav, Maeve, Mav. You know, she's the queen of the fairies, queen of the other world. She's the sovereignty goddess, and her name means mead, as sweet as honey, intoxicating. So I'm not saying there's not a moon goddess. I just think we need to understand Celtic mythology a bit different. And of course, the moon is reflecting the golden solar sovereignty goddesses. You know, so that mirror in the sky is actually reflected Mab light, whatever you want, Anya light, or however you want to see it. So anyway, I'll stop sharing. You can put your microphones back on and we'll chat about these ideas.
That was great, Erin.
That was an excellent.
Yeah, it's really
Rhiannon?
interesting.
Yeah,
Strikes me Rhiannon might be a lunar goddess.
Rhiannon.
Yeah.
Again, what would be your logic for that? She turns up on a white horse in a golden dress. Why would you say she was lunar?
Well, I guess primarily because they can't catch up with her. She's some sort of celestial light, and since she's feminine, it suggests the moon rather than the sun.
Yeah, I think Rhiannon's important. The three birds of Rhiannon, in the story of how Killuch and Olwen, Bran, the story of Bran, when they're traveling to bury his head, the three birds are kind of there, but so far away you can't reach them. It's similar to Rhiannon herself being out of arm's reach, isn't it?
In the other world, yeah. Another idea that came to mind is, you know, the moon waxes, is full, it wanes, then it's invisible. So you have the moon suggesting the youth, the you know, adult, and then the waning moon.
Yeah, Rhiannon is
a triple goddess sense.
Rhiannon's clearly a sovereignty goddess too, though, isn't she? You know, Pwyll marries her eventually, and so on. Or can the moon and the sun be one thing?
It's reflection, right?
Yeah, that Mary Magdalene thing, that balance between, you know, that somehow you've got the yin and yang.
They're on the ground over.
Yeah.
There's also there's also possibilities of Cerridwen, because I think of her also as a threshold, a goddess of the threshold, because she's involved with the initiations. We have an initiation chamber here called Cerridwen's Cauldron, Pentrefan Dolman, you may know. Actually there's the shape of a great sow on one big stone that's standing there. And somebody suggested that Turchtruith, who is the great boar that is the enchanted king that comes across from Ireland and chases Arthur, or he's trying to revenge the death of his son and the theft of the great crater, which is Cerridwen's Cauldron, which is a magic and very, very comes down from the Danann people. I've heard it suggested that the tusks of the boar reflect the moon, the new moon. And wasn't the Greek goddess, was it Persephone? Not Persephone, Persephone's mother, what's her name?
Demeter.
Aphrodite.
Yeah, she,
Right.
she, one of them is, has great ceremonies of the threshold of where they slaughtered hundreds of pigs for or threw them into a pit as part of the ceremony, which was initiation and that threshold between life and death.
One interesting observation with the idea of ancient mystery rites or initiations is that the moon would, of course, represent nighttime as opposed to the sun being daytime. And a lot of figures involved with mystery traditions are all holding torches because it's dark, you know. So that would imply nighttime is the mysteries time, and certainly like at Lake Nemi with the Nemeralia of Diana, it's a festival of torches and stuff, you know.
Or cave.
Yeah.
Here's one
Yeah,
artist depiction of Mary Magdalene, and they have her separating day and night exactly. And she
Wow.
also has this the skull you see, and the lilies of the grove. So she has the many. I've never thought of her as being a moon goddess or anything of that nature, but here she is right there, and her
balance.
her feast day, July 22nd, right there. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm gonna share this with my friends.
I know some people have observed that Bridget could be a Mary Magdalene because Bridget or Brigantia means the high one. So it's the same as Magdalene means the exalted one or the high one. So
Yeah,
it's a similarity.
Interesting.
I love it.
Interesting.
Don't Mary?
It struck me that,
Mary has the kind of
struck me that, you know, when you talk about MABN,
Franklin
the MAB
H.
the robin that appears, and it starts with the first tree after the summer solstice. So it's the beginning of the dark cycle.
Yes.
That's where her name begins.
So her name kind of begins the descent and concludes with the after the salmon's leap, the rising. And it takes you down and then brings you out again. That's amazing patterns, isn't it? You know, it's just is those patterns. And I love the star lore of Hydra the Serpent being the entire third Aicme.
Yes.
That it's all riding on the serpent's back, and then you're into the descent.
Giant wave.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
I
fascinating.
have a question.
Yeah, it seems very Kundalini.
Amy?
Yeah, let me find, I take notes like crazy. Okay. When you showed the on the screen your slide of the one after that wonderful drawing of the Hydra and the Cauldron and Corvus, you had sort of a picture of the stars. All right, the constellations. So this may be a dumb question, but can you give some, like, what's north, south, east, and west on that? Because I'm going outside trying to find these at night, and
So,
I don't know
for the
what's
northern
supposed to be
for the
where.
northern hemisphere, of course. So Draco, the dragon, is the pole star area, really. The pole star
North Star. Okay.
used to be in the dragon in the Bronze Age. Now it's shifted to the little bear because there's a wobble, you know. Yeah.
There's
So
an
where
app
is the
called
North
Sky
Star?
View.
Where is the North Star?
Can you find the Big Dipper?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right above my house.
Yes.
Yes.
The end of the
Yes.
end of the.
Yeah, I meant in the slide,
Dipper.
Yuri's slide. I know where it is in the sky. So I need to be looking up there for these, for Draco and Hydra and all of that.
Yeah, it's hard. It's not as bright as other constellations. So what I do, if it's not a great sky, is I'll look for Cassiopeia and Ursa Major, the Big Dipper.
I've never been able to find Cassiopeia.
And between Cassiopeia and the Big Dipper is the dragon area, if you like.
Oh, well, that's helpful. But there's also the you can get an app on your phone where it shows the figures of the stars and the stars themselves. As you wave it around the sky, they come up at the end of your phone, really, just there. It's worth doing if you have it, finding it very confusing, I think.
Well,
Sky
Continue
so
the
this
line.
goes back to the cauldron. The idea, I've been fascinated with this ever since you introduced it to me anyway, a couple of years ago, was that looking up into the polar star area, everything's going counterclockwise around the cauldron, right?
The cauldron
Is
as
that
in
right?
crater.
Yeah,
Mm.
the goddess is stirring it counterclockwise.
Yeah, the stirring is really important because it was a way of understanding why the stars rotate rather than realizing that planet Earth is spinning, you know. So it's wonderful that the stars rotate around the North Star, and the Big Dipper was stirring Ceridwen's cauldron, you know, that in some ways the entire night sky is the,
Love
I
it.
call it the stirring of the cosmic milk, you know.
That's right.
Yeah. And the
If you
goddess,
follow the line through the North Star,
yeah,
you'll
the
find
goddess at the center of
Cassiopeia.
that is Cassiopeia. You know, she's the heavenly boobies between the winter hexagon and the summer
I
triangle,
love that.
or she's centered on the Milky Way is what's important. You know,
Okay.
the Roman for the Milky was the Via Lactea. It was literally the way of the milk, and the milk comes from bosoms and stuff, you know. So she's there, and the Big Dipper is her ladle. So in
Oh, wow. Okay.
in Celtic Iron Age iconography, that's usually the goddess Rosmerta.
Mhm.
Again, so she's not a moon goddess. She's a goddess at the center of everything, stirring the night sky.
That's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah. Which is what Ceridwen's story does. You know, that's a stirring of the stars.
There you
Yeah.
go.
I love
Look
that.
at
Amy,
Franklin.
Franklin, can you show that again for Amy?
Yeah, I'm just gonna
What?
write the North Star.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, so you follow that through the North Star to find Cassiopeia on opposite.
Cassiopeia is like
Perfect.
The Big Dipper. Yeah, that's the Big Dipper. That's the
Yeah.
North Star. Yeah, so you go right through the North Star to find Cassiopeia on the other side.
Nice.
Perfect. Thank you. I've been looking in the wrong direction for Cassiopeia. That's smart. Okay.
and another funny thing in passing is Robert Graves contemplated who would be the goddess of the Druids. And he came up with a hypothetical name, which is Druantia, Queen of the Druids, Druantia. And she doesn't exist anywhere else other than the white goddess, you know. But life mimicking art, you know, really Nemetona is the same thing. You know, Nemetona is she of the sacred grove, goddess of the sacred grove. So you don't need to create Druantia. She was there anyway, you know. But then was it the Fellowship of Isis thing? Is Isis is goddess of 1,000 names or something? Or roses are
All those Egyptian goddesses had 1,000 names. Sekhmet has 1,000 names.
Yeah.
Isis has 1,000 names.
So
There's a very exciting event that they're anticipating. They're anticipating a star in the Corona Borealis to go nova any day now. So, you know, when a star goes nova, that's once in an age. That's a very rare event. And they're telling us any day that T Corona Borealis is going to go nova.
well, the Welsh
Where
tradition,
would
It'll be
that,
as bright as the
what part of the sky would I be looking at for the
Welsh
Corona
tradition,
Borealis?
Fury showed us crater in orbit. It would be south.
yeah, in Welsh, Northern Welsh tradition, Arianrhod is Corona Borealis. So that
Oh,
would
wow.
Yeah, that's the Northern Welsh law.
The last time a star went nova was 1987, when a star in the Large Magellanic Cloud went nova. We didn't see it up here in the Northern Hemisphere,
Wow.
but it certainly seems to be a kind of, biocosmic marker of something significant happening in the human psyche.
Like what? Trump not getting elected?
Well,
Let's hope.
marking the passing of ages, yeah, marking the, as
Okay.
the mythological dominants are coming in and out of, like, as they enter the dream and leave the dream, the sky is marking these moments.
We want that wake
Okay.
up call now.
Yes,
Yeah.
we need it now. If I may say, the only problem I mean, Graves is brilliant in The White Goddess, is just his, his imagination and all his concepts, but leaving off 7 very important trees was a disservice, because he presented it in that absolute way. And that bothered me.
So-
And go ahead.
This is what bothers me too.
It's his blind spot.
It's something that triggers me, that there's quite a few
Me too.
people on the internet now that dismiss the idea of a tree calendar because they just see it as made up by Robert Graves. So they just throw the whole thing away. But the 20 trees that we use and their sequence goes back to 1390 AD.
Right.
So
Right.
to say, and we've just figured out a way of putting them in a circle and then making a year wheel, but to be dismissive and say there's no such thing as a tree year, it's not true.
No, it's not.
There's 20 trees in the 14th century and they make a great year wheel. But
Quite arrogant of him, really, but I don't argue with people over it. If they want to do the 13, let them do the I have no problem with anybody wanting to worship whoever they want to worship,
you can't just be an all-knowing mind.
There you go.
You have to be a reflective mind, so that's kind of why I see the sun and moon as one thing, and the way they dance around the grove from new moon to full moon, they're dancing together, they're interacting together. It's not a choice of sun system or moon system.
Right.
So-
I've kind of moved
In
on.
yoga, it's hatha, sun and
Yeah.
moon.
It's all
Sun
one.
and the moon are the primary engines of the psyche. So you have 2 hemispheres of the brain. You have a masculine and a feminine, an ascending and a descending, joy and grief. These things
And
operate in our psyches.
like cogs in the wheel, the sun visits all 20 trees or all 12 signs of the zodiac in 1 year, and the moon does all 20 trees or 12 signs every month. So it's like a fast little spinning wheel, and the sun's going slowly around the ecliptic, I think. But both of them are visiting all 20 trees. I've kind of,
Yes.
I wouldn't say I understand it all, I don't, but now I've kind of moved on to pondering, what does Venus do? What does Mercury do? That they all dance around the cauldron.
That's
you
right.
know.
Whoops, wait a minute. I spent some time with Robert Bly years ago, and he still is. I don't know how many of you know who Robert Bly is, but he was a hero of mine for a very long time. He was a poet, and a very good poet in the 60s. He and Michael Mead and some other people sort of
James Hillman.
introduced the mythopoetic men's movement. And he started with Marion Woodman and the Union folks. He started looking at certain fairy tales and as guides for the life cycle. That's sort of a really bad way of describing what he did. But anyway, I loved his work. And so I got to spend some time with him in the 80s when he came out here. Delightful, grumpy guy, but I just loved him. And there's a story, I mean, he and I talked about his story, The Devil's Sooty Brother, and the importance of descent. And he didn't like the idea of just ascending, like Christianity is just ascending. There isn't any real going down, as he called it. And I really identified with that. And I was probably over enthusiastic in our conversation, because I was just so excited to be talking to him about something that I've always believed, is that being grounded and being able to go into the bones of everything,
The roots.
is so important instead of just ascending. And that's what you
right.
have to do, And so anyway,
Buddha's first
I
noble
love
truth,
him.
life is suffering.
Mhm.
Buddha's first noble truth is about suffering. We have to descend because we're incarnate. And if we're just descending, we're really not participating in what's going on here. It's a lot of
And
trouble.
we have the cycle for a reason.
Deal
We
with.
understand things as cycling.
Eternity.
Yeah.
Why
Right.
incarnate just to ascend? It's like,
Your life.
I come
you're
here, I
just
don't want to be
existing
here, I'm
here.
off.
Yeah.
And when the cycle is painful because an old way of life is going away, and we cling because it's very painful to lose what's going away.
But you got to seek your depths.
So
Yeah.
our next session is Ivy, and that will, in Ivy is the Cancer, Leo, Mary Magdalene, Bridget.
You're making the sign of the cross.
Oh God.
I'm Aquarian age. Yeah. Yeah, but that center point, well, that's Mithras, isn't it, on Hadrian's Wall? That's that. Yeah, but that kind of descending from the third eye down into the middle cauldron governed by Leo.
Exactly.
Leo governs the heart. So really interesting. That in itself is a descent into centeredness. Or
That's what reflection has a lot to do with. We reflect upon what we've done wrong. If we're going to grow, we have to reflect upon things.
Yeah.
I have a question. Is Hadrian's Wall, is that carving that you show all the time, is that still there? Says the American.
It's from Hadrian's Wall. It's now in the museum in Newcastle.
Oh.
So they took things away to preserve them from the weather.
But doesn't part of Hadrian's Wall still stand?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of ruins.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was hoping they hadn't cleared it all away.
There's some great, like they found Mithraic temples there, and they also found a shrine of water nymphs. There's a wonderful carving of 3 water nymphs pouring water, and that's
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and loads of depictions of Hercules, so but Hercules really is the 12 labors and the signs of the zodiac and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, they're not just stories, they're stories for mystery teachings. So I would argue, and I think Franklin is interested in it too, is that the whole story of how Kiluk Wan Olwen is a type of Hercules going through different constellations and achieving the impossible things.
Yes, there are 40 tasks. There are 40 tasks, I think, aren't there? Actually, I never quite made when I tried to sort them out, I never quite made 40 tasks, but wasn't that the thing? Perhaps there were 40.
Some are missing because there are something like 40 tasks. And when you read the whole story, they don't do 40, yet there's a conclusion and a happy ever after. So something's been lost, where are the other
finger missing?
bits missing, aren't they?
Yeah.
They just all ascended.
They all the same.
Jerry,
The
do you know
hidden three in each, was it the hidden three in each of the Aicme, perhaps?
Yeah.
Or maybe there was something like that.
Yuri, are you familiar with something that happens in the precession of the equinox or in the calendar that has to do with 40 days or 40 years or
Yes, and the 40
something?
days of grieving after death, which they have in India.
Oh,
The what?
okay.
Oh, 40 days of grieving.
40 years in the
Buddy.
desert.
I mean,
Covenant
it-
of Water
yeah.
by
The
Yeah.
Ogham,
Graham Verghese.
the Ogham divides the year wheel into 20, but you could split that into 40 very easily, couldn't you? You know, each section would be 9 degrees
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
as a totality.
It's ringing a bell, but I can't place it where I suspect that 40 occurs in some temple somewhere, but I just can't put it together.
Of course, the Bible references
Good
40
guess.
days and 40 nights.
40
It's-
days in the desert.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it has like an initiation, like somebody leads people
Mhm.
through the 40 days, but they don't make it, but everybody else gets to go on to the next one. So there's a kind of a Moses sort of connection to 40.
Mhm.
It's 20
Mm.
past, so I'll stop recording and we'll do our meditation.
Extraordinary presentation.